Shut up and sit down.
Esperance is a seaside agricultural support town similar to Emerald is in Queensland, and being on the coast it also supports a large tourist sector. Surrounding the town are large cattle, sheep and wheat farms who utilise the very large grain and wood chipping port that's similar to Albany's. The scale of farming operations around here are very large, and I'm starting to think that they have too much money compared to their East Coast counterparts, who all seem to have much smaller plots of land. The agricultural show was in town, and unlike the Royal Easter Show is in Sydney, here they are selling some very large agricultural machinery and the local farming produce without any show bags at all. Along the main beach is an esplanade similar to the Gold Coast or Darwin, and is shaded by a series of very large pine trees. The beaches are very similar to many of the others on the west coast, with very white sand that gives the water a wonderful turquoise colour. The beaches on the west side of town have surfable waves, but even at this time of the year the water is still very cold and only a few adventurous souls make their way into the water. There are many outlooks and memorials spaced along a delightful coastal walk. The Great Ocean Trail makes its way along the town's waterfront and then turns inland to the Pink Lake. But after all the salt mining, the lake is no longer pink. The town is sandwiched between the coastal sea and the series of freshwater lakes. The larger ones have been opened up to water sports such as skiing and kayaking. To the east of Esperance is the Cape Lagrange National Park, and is one of the many national parks that are spread out along the southern coastlines. The white sands of Cape Loran Beach and Lucky Bay look so picturesque, but the beaches are as hard as concrete and the water is lucky to be 15 degrees. There are many metamorphic rock formations that look like wounds on the planet that magna flowed out in the form of blood and formed scabs. Many of these wounds are now dotted through the entire landscape. I couldn't help but hike up one of them. The landscape reminds me of much of the younger Pilbara, where the outcrops have disintegrated into piles or boulders. It very much reminds me too of the landstone formations around Sydney, where pockets of sands have been captured and embedded in the stone until erosion has finally set it free. Out of the cold breeze, the sun made the day quite comfortable. The weather app told me that the coastal rain was on the way, so I decided to try avoiding the wet weather by taking the inland route via Lake Grace. That also had the advantage of allowing me to look at the inland lakes that dotted much of the southern Western Australian region. I remember checking out the Pink Lake at Hutt Lagoon near Geraldton and thinking that it was something special, but down this neck of the woods there are a number of very similar pink lakes. Heading towards Lake Grace, the weather really started turning on me and I started doubting my plans. The rain out here seemed to be moving faster than I was going and I wasn't outrunning it. I rode through the Stirling National Park and saw some of the mountains all around me. I wanted to stop and go have a look, but all the roads heading off into the mountains were all dirt, and being wet it just screamed disaster at me. I saw the opportunity to pull over to the side of the road and have a good look at one of those lakes. I assumed that they were all just ponds in the sand dune and jumped over a small line of vegetation, and very quickly found out that the ponds were more clay than sand, and I slipped right in. Finally those knee pads served some good use. I made it down to Lake Grace, and the weather hadn't improved that much. It was still as cold as anything, although it was no longer raining. I filled up the tank and grabbed a serve of hot chips and then started pulling off the bike's tail bag to get to the cold weather gear in the panniers. Now dressed in full wet weather winter gear, I headed off down for Lake King. It's literally a 115-kilometre road cut straight through a flat sand dune. Worried that my rear tyre would square off again, I started slaloming down the road in an effort to keep my tyres round. The oncoming traffic saw my headlights several kilometres off, and they seemed to be quite nervous as I finally passed them. About halfway down the straight I stopped at Batchin for a quick squiz with the drone to get a good view of what the surroundings were like. Finally getting to Lake King, and after the previous slip up I tentatively walked down to the water's edge, only to find that the lake was more sand than clay. There was also a Bush Engineering Tractors museum full of old farming equipment, and I had to stop at one of those farming landmarks to let people know where the driveway is. I'd now been riding for nearly 500 kilometres and there'd been little else out here than huge wheat and canola farms and the odd lake. Over east, only the massive cattle stations come close to being similar in scale. The sugar canes are much smaller fields than the canola farms are out here. I was just about to get to Esperance when I saw a rainbow at the end of a long straight, and I finally found out what's truly at the end of a rainbow. And it might be a pot of gold for our farmers, but for me it was just a wall of rain that was cold and wet. I was lucky to make it to Esperance before the local version of the 5 o'clock squill, as the local supermarkets around here close at 6 p.m. The beginning of the week had been consumed with rain, but like all my other stops in WA, it's still been totally comfortable. I'm in a one-bedroom penthouse apartment that overlooks Esperance Bay, and I've been sitting here getting my work done while watching this glorious view. The chain continues to be a frustration, so I looked up online and most people suggest that you should only get about 30,000 kilometres out of a chain on a leader bike, and I'm about 35,000 kilometres down. They also say that the danger of the chain is that it will wear through the sprockets on the teeth until they get so low that the chain will derail. There's still plenty of meat on the sprockets, so I decided to spray a can of WD on the chain in an effort to quiet the grinding noise. And after spraying enough on there to be worried about the drips hitting the exhaust pipe and catching fire, I took the bike out for a ride, and for some reason the chain had shrunk and become too tight. It's really starting to aggravate me quite severely. Either way, it should last me the next 3,000 to 4,000 kilometres until I get to the next service stop at Adelaide. So a mental note for all you riders out there: when you can hear a noise coming from the chain, it means that it needs oiling. I dropped the drone from the seat of the bike while trying to get some footage last week. You may have noticed the vibrations in the video. After searching the internet for some really unhelpful advice about similar vibrations, I finally found a hairline fracture on the gimbal mount. And when the drone was on the ground, I could calibrate it, but when it was in the air, the gimbal would come out of the mount just enough to change the calibrations. After realising this, I got some super glue and very carefully glued it all back together without locking the gimbal mount to itself. I'm finding the path to becoming an expert drone pilot teaches you to be an expert super gluer. The new phone and the camera are both proving their worth, even though the camera only charges from the laptop charger and the phone refuses to charge from the rusty bike's USB port. I've ordered a new USB adapter for the bike which will hopefully fix the problem. Otherwise I can only rely on Google Maps for about 5 hours, or turn it off and look at it when I get the chance to stop. This is my last week in Western Australia and I'm really going to miss this place. I remember spending a week in Mount Isa and I couldn't wait to get to Darwin. I learned from that experience and had planned to go straight across the Nullarbor with only rest breaks. I have travelled more in one day before, but I haven't had 2 or more days in a row like I'm going to have to do while heading back east. Currently the dirt road from Wirrallah to Kungunurra in South Australia are only open to 4-wheel drives, and the bitumen path through Port Augusta is about 400 kilometres longer. I've done sunrise to sunset rides before, but I'm still umming and ahhing about breaking up the ride into 3 days, and this has increased my apprehension about leaving WA. Esperance is a very comfortable place, and it's hard to believe that the desert interior starts only a few hundred kilometres away. I didn't realise that the last sunset over the ocean would be at Margaret River, and while in Esperance I've been treated to both a sunrise and sunset over the land. Next stop is Coober Pedy, with a stopover in New Kukla and maybe Port Augusta. Hopefully I can find some time to pull over and enjoy the unique scenery while on my way. I don't know what shape the bike will be in once I get to Adelaide, but I'm reasonably confident that I can nursemate it all the way there. So thanks for following my adventures around Australia, and remember to go out there and do something to enjoy your day.